So today what we're going to look at is Chapter 26, Brave New World, Communism on Trial. So we're going to go over a couple big things in this chapter. What we're really looking at is the Soviet Union beginning to collapse. And some things that the Soviet Union, the communist leaders are going to try to do to save it before it eventually collapses under Gorbachev. So we're going to look at the post-war Soviet Union. Now, from Chapter 25, you guys started to see what was going on with the breakdown of the Yalta agreements. This chapter kind of piggybacks on that a lot. There's some things that we got to flow back to and then kind of bring forward. It's just the way your book is kind of set up. So what you guys got to understand is, remember, the Cold War is about the space race and the arms race. And so when we talk about arms, we're talking about weapons. And when we talk about the space race, we're talking about satellites, getting to the moon. The United States versus the Soviet Union is really what you're kind of looking at with the Cold War. Now, it is more the West, the democracies, versus the Soviet Union. But a lot of the little incidents that occur between the West and the Soviet Union will really be United States versus the Soviet Union. It's not that America's allies aren't involved in these things. It's just that the main people, the main superpowers after World War II was over, was the United States and the Soviet Union, even though the Soviet Union's economy was relatively bad after World War II. As you can see, from Stalin to Khrushchev, 20 million citizens had lost their lives in World War II. And Stalin, because he was so aggressive with getting that collectivization of agriculture, he had killed a lot of his own people to do that through starvation, particularly in the Ukraine area. The other thing that you have to look at what the Soviet Union is trying to do is they're trying to become an industrialized nation. So they would like to go ahead and increase their steel production. And just like I asked you guys in class, why would a country want to suddenly start increasing their steel? Factories and war machines. So you're going to see the Soviet Union doing a lot of these arms races. They're going to try and meet us, the United States. Every time we build something, they're going to build it too. A lot of that has to do with the CIA, the United States' secret agency, and then the KGB, which is the Soviet Union's equivalent of the CIA. And we're going to have spies in the United States, and the United States is going to send spies over to the Soviet Union as well. So in 1952, the United States launches the hydrogen bomb. So we'll detonate it. It works. And, because there's this huge mushroom cloud, we got plenty of photos of it. But in 1953, the Soviet Union will also launch the hydrogen bomb. This shocks a lot of Americans. There's no way that the Soviet Union could have been able to produce that quickly without them having spies, or at least this is how Americans feel. And whenever Americans feel like there's a lot of spy activity, whenever we feel personally threatened, you will see a disregard for constitutional or civil liberty rights. So you're going to see a red scare developing in the United States. In 1957, we looked at this in the last chapter, is that the Soviet Union will create the intercontinental ballistic missiles, so ICBMs, and that's pretty serious. So the Soviet Union is really spending a lot of money in their military production. And then October of the same year, 1957, they launched Sputnik, and Sputnik is a satellite, a Russian satellite in space. So by 1957, it looks like America, the United States, the West is falling behind to the Soviet Union's engineering tactics. It looks like the Soviet Union is winning this Cold War. And so the United States and the Western powers, they can't allow this. So in 1959, the United States will launch our satellite into space. And by 1960, with the election of John F. Kennedy, which we kind of looked at in the last chapter as well, Kennedy is going to announce the race to the moon. And he says, publicly, America will be the first country to put a man on the moon, and we'll do it. Kennedy will be dead by that point, but we will get the first man on the moon. So you can see it's it's tit for tat. Everything the Soviet Union does, the United States wants to do. Everything the United States wants to do, the Soviet Union wants to do. And this competition between the two superpowers is really going to tax the economy a lot and tax the people who live in these countries a lot. And then in 1960, we're going to have a U-2 incident. And just like the band U and then 2, this is spy planes. So the United States and the Soviet Union were constantly spying on each other. And so what happens is Gary Powers, who is a United States spy, is going to get shot down over Soviet territory. We are supposed to be having kind of a peace conference. This is between Eisenhower and Khrushchev. And remember, Khrushchev is trying to ease tensions between the West and the Soviet Union. And so we were going to have a nice little peace talk and try and maybe ease tension between us. And then when they catch us spying on them, which we had promised we wouldn't do, that's when the tensions are going to start heating up. And that's when you see Kennedy getting elected. You're going to have the Berlin Wall, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs invasion. You have all these things happening during Kennedy's administration. So you can see when you look at post-war Soviet Union, it is kind of a country that is trying to take its place as a superpower, and it's trying to take its place as a superpower as a communist leader of the world. So when you look at what Stalin does, Stalinism in action, is when you look at the post-war recovery, he does a very labor-intensive heavy industry development. You see women, 40% of the workforce, and consumer goods and housing are pretty much going to be ignored. So when you look at the Soviet Union, they're going to have a lot of shortages in their system, in their economy. And this is part of his 5-year plan. His 5-year plan, Stalin's 5-year plan, is to build up the industry so much that they will be able to compete with the West, have money. But in doing so, what's going to end up happening is that the Soviet Union is not going to focus on building things that are not needed. So like you like to go to Target and you like to buy all this extra crap. Well, you can't do that in the Soviet Union during this time because they're not going to have extras, because they're focusing on just developing their heavy industries. By 1947, production is up to the 1939 level. So they've, in just a few years' time after the war has ended, they've gotten their production level back up. And they're going to build up their military strength as well. So this is a part of the reason why these consumer goods are actually pretty scarce. So you're going to see MiG fighters. So you'll see MiG fighter planes. We'll see thermonuclear weapons being developed, Sputnik. So they're going to focus a lot of their money on building up their military. Their housing is definitely going to be limited because of that. So in the Soviet Union, you're going to have severe housing shortage. By the late 1940s, 9 million Russians are in Siberian concentration camps. And these are his labor camps that Stalin sets up. And basically Stalin is this, he takes after like Hitler's mentality with the concentration camps. If you go against him, you go. And so Stalin really kind of purges the old Bolshevik party and any enemies that he had. And he gets real suspicious because he's a dictator, he's ruling by force. He gets real suspicious of anybody who kind of looks at him wrong, says anything, criticizes him. They automatically go. Yeah, he gets real paranoid, like he'll send people's wives if he thinks that the guy is doing something against him. So paranoia does strike deep. So what they're trying to do when Stalin dies is there is an attempt at trying to ease tensions with the West, because the United States and the Western powers see Stalin as somebody who is dangerous. I mean, he's sending all his people, a good portion of his population is either being starved into submission or they're being forced into submission through fear of going to the camps. So we see Khrushchev coming into power. When Khrushchev comes into power, his term is to de-Stalinize the Soviet Union. So de-Stalinization is his policy. What he would like to do is reduce tensions with the West, and he tried to actually increase the standard of living for the Soviet Union. So under Stalin, because he was so restrictive and because the consumer goods were so scarce, you saw a real lack or a real low level of living standards. And so Khrushchev is going to want to increase that. He's also going to expand the Soviet Union into some areas that they hadn't been at. Like, what he's going to do is he's going to go into these lands that they have, and he's going to try and develop them into agricultural land, and they call these the virgin lands. And so these virgin lands are going to help with the food shortages that were happening in the Soviet Union. Remember in the last chapter I said that Khrushchev, he makes a visit to the United States. On his visit throughout, he notices that Americans are eating corn, and so he tries to teach the Soviets how to grow corn because he thinks that this is what's going to help them eat and it's going to help the economy. So that's how he gets the nickname Corn Man. So I guess he just thought corn was going to be the saving grace. So he told the Soviets to eat more corn. He attempts to weaken party and government bureaucracy, but he does have a lot of opposition. You're looking at a Soviet Union that is the leaders are starting to get a little bit older. And the older you get, sometimes the more resolute you are to your opinions, are more resolute to your way of thinking on everything. And so this is what you're going to see with the Soviet Union, particularly when you get to the Gorbachev era in the 80s. You're going to see those old party leaders not wanting to budge. And because they're not wanting to do any reform, this is where the Soviet Union will collapse. But remember, this is the same thing with those Enlightenment or absolutionist rulers that we looked at a while ago. If you don't do the reforms early enough, if you wait till the period gets so bad that the reforms can't go on, that it's never going to work, that people aren't going to buy into it, then you'll see your system or your power collapsing. And that's kind of what happens with the Soviet Union. They realize that they need to do some reforms, but by the time they start trying to do it, it's over for them. So he does do these anti-Stalin speeches. In the anti-Stalin speech, he's kind of just talking to someone about, what he doesn't like about Stalin or what he didn't like about Stalin. And it got leaked to the press, and it was leaked to the West. So the United States and the Western powers, they got a hold of it. And people start to see Khrushchev maybe as somebody who they can work with. He gives more intellectual and literary freedom as well. So you'll see different things happening during this time in the Soviet Union. It's not going to be widespread criticism of the government because that's not going to be allowed in this kind of government. But they do allow people to have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more freedom of the press. Remember, Khrushchev is the guy who will try and send missiles to help Fidel Castro in Cuba. And this is going to be a huge mistake. And part of the reason why Khrushchev will actually have his downfall is so Khrushchev believes that it is his duty to help out Fidel Castro in Cuba. And so he sends Russian-made, Soviet Union-made missiles to Cuba. When Kennedy kind of plays chicken with the whole nuke stuff, threatening nuclear war to get the Soviet Union to back down, Khrushchev does back down, and so the party leaders in the Soviet Union think of Khrushchev as weak, and so they remove him in 1964. So the next guy who will come in is Brezhnev, and Brezhnev years are from 1964 to 1982. He's kind of a realist, which means he looks at the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is that he needs to make stability his #1 goal in the Soviet Union. So he preserves the status quo. He doesn't really try and change a whole lot because he's trying to make certain that there's stability in the Soviet Union and stability in foreign affairs. So domestic and foreign, he wants there to be a lot of stability. A controlled society. So he's going to revive some of Stalin's stuff. He really does try and say that Stalin was a good party leader. He's also going to be pretty restrictive on anybody who is an opposition to the government. So if you oppose the government, he's pretty strict with them. He either arrests them and keeps them on house arrest, or he forces them to go into exile. The press is going to be controlled, and the Pravda is the truth, and the Investia is the news. But neither one of them actually ever told the truth. The Soviets never said that they had an accident or there was a mistake in any of their newspapers. So if a MiG fighter plane went down, it was never reported. If an airline, airline plane, a civilian one, went down, it never was reported. So most people kind of just laugh about these newspapers because neither one of them ever tells the truth or actually talks about what's really going on. And conformity was the rule from education to childhood. It was not allowed to be left-handed in the Soviet Union. So they're really about keeping everything tried and true the same way. I'm going to stop here and we're going to go to part 2.